What is going on, Hive Warriors? It's your boy Edward V, and today we're going to talk about, is intermittent fasting good for you? The number one search topic on intermittent fasting these past few months, and even this week specifically, is if intermittent fasting is good for you. Also, this is one of the questions that I get a lot, and a lot of my viewers and subscribers are aware of what I feel about intermittent fasting. But to tackle this question in a very roundabout way, I'm going to talk about people who shouldn't be fasting, what pitfalls you might find during intermittent fasting, and if there are health benefits that you might find within intermittent fasting. Hopefully this video can be a hub to answer this specific question. Now I'm going to go ahead and break it down in this video. Stay tuned. Alright guys, just in case you did not know, my jump ropes are still in back order. We have it scheduled to be released around June, mid-June, to return so that the orders can go back out. Due to this situation, this quarantine situation that we're in, unfortunately or fortunately, it sold a lot of my jump ropes and completely eliminated the stock that I had quicker than I had anticipated, which caused a slowdown in production. But we are aiming for a mid-June restocking of the jump ropes, and if you want to order your jump ropes for the first time ever, I'm allowing a pre-order process, so you can click in, purchase your jump rope, and you will have it locked down for you once we restock. Once again, if you want to go ahead and purchase the jump rope, you can either click on the card on the top right hand corner, or the link will be down in the description below. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So this is an important question. Is intermittent fasting good for you? Now, it's also a very open-ended question. What does it mean really? Is it good for you? Is it good for you in terms of health? Is it good for you in terms of weight loss? Is it good for you in terms of something that you can adhere to, something that you can do for the rest of your life? That's kind of why I took this question and made a video format of it, and where I'm trying to do the most roundabout way of answering that question. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is in terms of weight loss. Is intermittent fasting good for you for weight loss? Yes, intermittent fasting is good for you for weight loss. Many studies out there, I've touched on many studies out there, and even meta-analysis study, not just individual studies, but studies of studies, have shown that there are benefits with intermittent fasting when it comes to weight loss and fat loss specifically. Now, keep in mind that calorie restriction still matters, and I do have a lot of followers or a lot of viewers that hate when I say that, but it is where we are in the scientific literature. There isn't anything that states that calories would not matter if you implemented an intermittent fasting protocol. So unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, calories still matter. So then you're probably thinking to yourself, then what's the point of intermittent fasting if calories matter? Well, the point of intermittent fasting is that it helps you target body fat more aggressively. And if you look at the study by Dr. Stephen Anton that looks at 16 clinical trials, looking at things like alternate day fasting and 16-8, you can see that during that metabolic switchover, your body targets predominantly body fat for fuel. And this is because you have depleted your body of the quick energy source, which is glycogen storage or carbohydrates. Once you've gone through that, your body then starts to tap into body fat, and this all comes from the intermittent fasting process. Also, there are studies out there that don't dive so deep into the calorie partitioning and still see that weight loss isn't different between if you wanted to do calorie restriction or intermittent fasting. So even if you wanted to focus on the few studies that look at full fasting that have a similar weight loss to calorie restriction, that bare minimum at least shows you that there isn't a detriment if you wanted to do intermittent fasting as opposed to just caloric restriction. Now let's go ahead and move on to who should not be fasting, because this is an important question. Who shouldn't be fasting? And there are actually people who should not be fasting, or at least should definitely consult their doctors before starting an intermittent fasting protocol. Now, who are those people? Well, if you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, you should definitely consult your doctor. And the reason that you should do this is because intermittent fasting is something that definitely has an effect in your blood sugar levels. So that means that there are shifts that are happening hormonally that are focused on your blood sugar, which is the element that becomes a problem when you are type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic, with type 1 being an insulin sensitivity issue and type 2 being an insulin resistance issue. Type 1 not allowing you to produce enough insulin, and type 2 producing so much insulin so frequently that you become insulin resistant, and the sugar intake just continues to spill over into your bloodstream on a regular basis. So if you're ever going to start an intermittent fasting protocol and you have some level of diabetes, you should definitely consult your doctor. Also, if you have an eating disorder, you should definitely consult a physician or a psychiatrist, whatever is best for you, if you are in fear that this can drive you into that eating disorder place that you were in your life previously. So you always have to be mindful of that. But keep in mind, even creating any sort of diet can create an eating disorder. So if you're going to take up any diet at all, you should definitely consult your doctor. Now, a few people that I believe should not do it at all because we lack the scientific research for it, which is the most important thing, is that what I tell you guys or what I report to you guys or what I break down for you guys are all based on scientific literature, and specifically and more importantly based on the overall literature, the meta-analysis that we have. So if we don't have that for a particular group of people, you have to be very mindful that you are entering somewhat of an abyss because the scientific literature may not apply to you. Because although they're positive for specific groups that they're actually putting together to complete these studies. And it might not directly connect to you. So what are those people? Well, children. Anyone under the age of 16, there really isn't any study out there that shows anything about intermittent fasting in regards to that age group. Maybe you can do intermittent fasting when you're 15 or 14 or 13, but the issue is we just don't know. And the safest answer is that unfortunately it isn't recommended for you to do it because we don't have the scientific data to make that recommendation at this time. Also, women who are pregnant, we just don't have the scientific data because pregnant women have never been included in an intermittent fasting study. We don't know what it would do if you removed the continuous nutritional intake from continuous eating when you are bearing a child. So that has to be taken into effect. There isn't a study that connects to you specifically. Now, there are positive studies that we've seen of other people, but never one with someone who is a pregnant mother. So that person might not feel any negative effects to themselves, but there may be negative effects to the child. We just don't know. And the final one is after giving birth. Mothers who are breastfeeding their children, they have not done any studies with breastfeeding mothers. So we don't know what effect intermittent fasting can have on you, and erring on the safe side, the recommendation would be for those who are breastfeeding not to partake in an intermittent fasting protocol until you complete the breastfeeding process. And of course, anyone else with any underlying medical conditions that can be affected negatively should consult their doctors when starting any diet protocol, albeit intermittent fasting or anything else. And the final thing that we're going to talk about is the healthiness or lack thereof of intermittent fasting. Now, in my last video that I talked about this new study that was released, that was pretty important and significant because it actually looked at the proteome of the participants of the study and saw that the full breakdown of the protein within all of the cells that they took from the blood samples of each of those participants that showed many different biological outcomes of health, things like improving cognitive function, reducing Alzheimer's disease, reduction in cancer, reduction in obesity. Those things were found within the full protein breakdown of all of the cells taken from those who were in a fasted state. Now, keep in mind, it was a Ramadan fast that they were looking at, and it was 14 hours of fasting. Now, I did see a lot of people say, well, that video should be called intermittent dry fasting. Please keep in mind that dry fasting on a daily basis is pretty negligible when you put it against daily water fasting. It's essentially the same thing. You are not eating for 14 hours, then you are eating a lot of carbohydrates and drinking a lot of liquids after that 14-hour period, you have not given your body any possibility or any chance to get into that separation zone, which normally takes about 3 days of dry fasting, which I do not recommend, but it normally takes about that time before you start to see separation and differences between someone who is doing a water fast and someone who is doing a dry fast. So dry fasting for 14 hours is essentially the same thing as water fasting for 14 hours. So I do want to put that out there because it is a little frustrating to see people consistently say, well, you better say that it's dry fasting because it's not the same thing. It is essentially the same thing. You have not fasted for a long enough time for there to be a difference between water fasting and dry fasting when it is 14, 16, 20 hours of fasting. One thing that I want to touch on is this massive meta-analysis that includes 85 different studies. Yes, it is accumulated from Ramadan fasting, and that's a good thing because the participants fast for religious purposes, which means that they are actually following these protocols. The 85 studies was a full meta-analysis and systematic review and regression analysis. It was released recently in March 10th of 2020, overlooking 25 different countries, age range from 16 all the way to 80 years old, with a time frame since 1982 all the way to 2019. And what that study saw was that yes, there were fat loss benefits for those doing intermittent fasting and health benefits that they saw for those doing intermittent fasting. Now this is pretty big, pretty extensive, overlooking a wide age range and multiple countries. And if you understand the hierarchy of studies, meta-analysis and systematic reviews are important. This study also saw that the timing of their fast, so how long they fast, was important, and when they fast was also important, as it was seen in the regression formula. Also, there have been many studies looking at oxidative stress reduction with the time restricted feeding setup of intermittent fasting, which is eating in the morning and fasting at night, and many other studies looking at the health benefits of fasting. So essentially, this video is here to tell you that just like any other diet, intermittent fasting is as safe as doing basically any other diet. Any change in whatever you are doing would require some type of understanding and possibly maybe some consultation from someone who can help you with this. But inherently, the process of fasting, of intermittent fasting, fasting for 16 hours or 20 hours or 23 hours, inherently those fasting protocols have not been seen to be harmful in any way. But as I've mentioned before, everyone is different. So if there is any underlying medical issue, you should definitely check with your doctor first. So this video was more of a conversational style video, but I did want to tackle this question as I've been asked this question many times. And this is a question that currently a lot of people are looking to be answered in a more consumable way. And hopefully I was able to do that in this video. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of links down in the description below, plus that meta-analysis that I talked about that involved 85 studies across many years and across 25 countries. And as always, I want to thank my patrons for my Patreon, and I'm going to go ahead and put their names right up here. And as always, guys, I'll see you on Wednesday for another FAQ. Peace!